All right, there we go. Reading that to the jury. We're only going to have Richard for this because we want to make sure Latonia stays clean. She's from that area there. Who knows, Richard? Let's go to it. Me and you were both saying this when we were listening to this. I have never seen, I'm not saying it's wrong, each state is different, a judge reading what appeared to maybe be an indictment, it doesn't really make a difference to me, about basically the government's case. Typically what the jury is asked to do is that here are the charges, here are the dates that are alleged, maybe read who the witnesses may be to determine if the jury knows any of them. That was probably already done previously. But boy, if I had known that you could do this in court, I would have written out all of my opening statement and given it to the judge. So I had the judge saying the words before I got up. I find this to be rather offensive.
Yeah, if I was the defense, I'd have a real problem with this. The judge, by reading this information, is as far as the jury's concerned, almost giving his blessing. It's almost like he's telling the jury this is true, which he shouldn't be doing at all. It would be okay for him to explain briefly what the case is about, what the charges are, but then it's time to hand it off to the prosecution to give an opening statement. So I'm a little puzzled by it. You and I were talking during the break. We see it the same way, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the judge is basically telling him what the legal issue is, but not what the facts underlying it are. That's the prosecution job in opening. Okay, it was done. Now, there's a controversy that's arising here as to whether or not the prosecution is going to be able to use the rap lyrics of these individuals as evidence against them. The defense is saying that's racist and violation of their First Amendment rights. People rap about things all the time. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're engaged in organized criminal activity. Prosecutors saying it's actually describing their activity. And I'm being told that while the judge has not ruled on this motion yet, nevertheless, he read some of that to the jury, and I think part of that epiphany that we just saw right there. What are your thoughts about this evidential issue?
Let's start with the First Amendment. It is not a violation of the First Amendment to use something somebody said as evidence against them in a trial. That notion is ridiculous. If you say something, it can be used against you. So it's not a First Amendment violation. It might not be relevant. I don't know exactly when these songs were made. Are these lyrics that were written after the crimes in question, when they're supposedly talking about having committed them? That would seem to be highly probative. So when you're thinking about it, forget for a minute that they're rap lyrics. Let's just say they're things the defendants wrote down about crimes they had committed. Would those be admissible in a trial? Sure, of course they would. And the defendants can get on the stand and say, that's not what I was talking about. They have the right to combat that evidence, but of course it would be admissible.
Yeah, so let's make a distinction here, because I don't think we know right now. To your point, you're saying that if they get up there and say, blah, 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 on such and such a day, on such and such a place, I capped the guy, you know, whatever. And
that was really good. I like that.
Thanks. I can actually do better. But anyway, that would be one thing. I think that there's an argument here that they're bringing out information prior to this that may be gang-related, gang-sounding, and and let's talk about the evidence rules here. There is a rule typically in most states that says, in the federal, it's 403, which basically says, you know, even though it may be probative, you used that word before, under evidence rule 403 or the corresponding state rule, it can lead to undue confusion with the jurors, mix-up issues, and we find that the probative value is not outweighed, they say, by the prejudicial effect. So let's go to the previous statements prior to the instances happening. Is it just character assassination, which is prohibited by the rules, or is it relevant evidence for the prosecutor?
Right. So lots of rap music talks about mayhem and illegal activity. That's part of the lyrics of a lot of songs, right? And I would think if you just wanted to put in evidence that this defendant raps a lot about illegal activity, that would be excluded, because that's not relevant to anything, and that is sort of character assassination. It is sort of prejudicial. I think the prosecution's point here is that these particular lyrics were one of two things. Either they were lyrics about crimes that had been committed, which seems relevant, or they were calls or messages to other gang members, other participants in the conspiracy. They were actually intended as communications, and that too would seem relevant to me. That's much different than this guy sings a lot about murder. Obviously, he's guilty.
Right, that's a great point. I mean, because one of the arguments I would be making as a prosecutor, because this is what we do, we go back and forth, is saying, Judge, 403 does not apply here. The reason it's relevant is that there are exceptions to character, quote-unquote, assassination evidence, motive, intent, opportunity, plan, preparation, absence of a mistake, defense. What this goes to show is his association with a group, and to your point, communicating messages to that group. So I want to introduce it, if for no other reason, to say he's associated with this group where we have a RICO charge, and any spoke in the wheel along the way is relevant for RICO. Is that the relevance argument you think prosecutors make?
Absolutely. And think about RICO. Like, RICO is one of the hardest things in the world to prove in terms of criminal activity. And the judge was going over everything. You have to show a criminal enterprise, a conspiracy to commit crimes. You have to show predicate acts, which are individual illegal acts, and you have to show it all amounts to a pattern of racketeering activity. That's a lot. That's a heavy burden of proof. But the communication that might be in those songs could fulfill some of the conspiratorial aspects of a RICO claim, that was actually communicating and conspiring amongst the defendants.
Right, and if you have a RICO, you don't even have to be a part of all of the activity or organization. You just need to be a part. That's why it's such a powerful tool. Okay, great commentary. Appreciate it. We're going to take another quick break. We'll be back on the other end. Please stay with us.